Let's go live button, which means we've got to wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plains of the internet before we go ahead and get started. We always got to wait for things to, warm up before we get rolling. And it looks like we're on YouTube. We're waiting on Facebook here. We've got Rumble booting up. We've got Twitter's alive and well. Let's wait for Twitch. Come on, Twitch. Come on now. It looks like you're almost there, right around the corner. And there you are. That means we can go ahead and get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. Today, we're talking about the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, day one. This is the day that a lot of us have been waiting for. Here, we're not going to be able to, of course, watch it because it's not being televised. No audio recordings, no reproductions are allowed. But we're going to do what we can to piece together exactly what took place today in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. And so we've got a lot to get to. We're going to start off by asking ourselves, how do you say Gill-len? Is it Gill-len, Gill-lane? Is it Gill-lane? Is it Gill-lane? There's a lot of different things that people are saying out there. So that's business number one. We're going to be talking a lot about Ghislaine Maxwell. And so we're going to learn how to say it first. Then we're going to learn a little bit more about the court. Where is this taking place? In New York, the Thursgood Marshall Federal Courthouse is where this is taking place. And we're going to poke around outside the scene. We're going to take a look at what the protests look like, what the media is doing. Everybody's camped up outside the courthouse. A lot of people have a lot of eyeballs on this case. We can keep tabs on who is coming and going from the courthouse. Obviously, Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers are going to be there. And so we saw Lara Menninger, we saw Jeff Pagliuca work their way into the courthouse. But we also saw, who did we see? Oh, yeah, Ghislaine's sister. Ghislaine's sister came to the courthouse. Who did not come? Scott Borgerson. You know who that is? Her husband. So he's not going to be going there. At least we haven't seen him yet. So who is going, who is not going? And maybe that might give us some hints about who is testifying and who is not testifying. So we'll take a look at that and more. We're going to take a look at the court docket because we have updates from November 28th and November 29th. A couple final things hit the court docket before the opening arguments took place in court today. And then, of course, we have the opening arguments. Now, as I said, we're not going to be able to listen to any of this, but there are people who are live tweeting this on Twitter. And so we're going to take a look at a guy named Adam Klasfeld. He's over, I think he's the editor-in-chief over at lawandcrime.com. And he's actually there in the courthouse in New York. And so he was live tweeting the proceedings today. And we're going to check in on that. We're going to see what U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Lara Pomerantz, she's the U.S. attorney who is prosecuting Ghislaine Maxwell. And we're going to see what the defense attorney, Bobbi Sternheim, had to say. This is that really powerful defense attorney, that person I was telling you is very expensive, somebody that has been brought in on the most highest of high profile cases. And so we had opening arguments from both of them. Then we got our very first witness in this case. We had Epstein's former pilot, the guy who flew the Lolita Express back and forth between the U.S. and Epstein's Island, guy by the name of Lawrence Paul Visacki Jr., started testifying today about the last hour of the proceedings, and it all ended at 5 p.m. sharp Eastern time. Judge Allison Nathan said, we're done for the day, and that was it. So we're going to get through all of that and more. If you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that, over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We've got people chatting away over there. We got three girlies, shout outs. We've got Avalon Acres. Good to see you. B Spec is over there. Jeremy Matrita is chatting away as well. But there's a form. It looks just like this. And if you have a question about Ghislaine Maxwell, then you can ask it in here, and we'll do our very best to get to those. We're also taking super chats, of course, from our friends over on YouTube. And so if those pop up throughout the stream, we'll get to those as well. This entire stream is long, so it's going to be clipped up. If you're looking to share clips with friends or family, we have a clips channel. Robert Gruler ESQ Clips is the place to be for that. So we've got to dive into business for the day. Ghislaine Maxwell, Gill-len, Gill-lane, Gill-lane. There's a lot of different ways people are saying it. How do you say it before we can actually start talking about this case meaningfully? We got to figure out what we're talking about here. And so I found an article over from NY Mag, and they give us a couple different permutations about how to say this name. You can see here, it says, a reader writes, how the heck do you pronounce her name? A lot of people are having fun with it, but there are a couple different pronunciations here. And so remember, she's English. And so there is an English pronunciation, which is Gill-len, as you can see here, Gill-len. So Gill-len. And then we have Ghislaine's brother, Ian, says it Gill-len. So like Gill-len. You can hear his version there. And then if you fast forward through this document, you're going to say, and you're going to hear a lot of U.S. news anchors saying Gill-lane. So Gill-len, Gill-len, and Gill-lane. Those are all appropriate. But what they're telling you is never pronounce the S is what they're saying here. So don't pronounce the S. So that's just a public service announcement for all of us out there that are going to be talking about this case for the foreseeable future. Ghislaine doesn't seem like it's the correct pronunciation, even though the chat disagrees. Obviously, we can see that clearly. So now that we know that, I want to take a look at the mind map. We have a mind map update. So if you have missed the prior release videos on this channel, you may have noticed that there was a mind map video that came out, and I have spent a little bit more time on it, so I want to share that with you now. The mind map in the Ghislaine Maxwell case is going to be very useful for us to understand all the moving parts. Remember, this case has been something that has been developing over the last 2+ decades, over 20 years, because it goes back to 2007, and then involving people that were sort of being trafficked for many years before that. And the web of deceit and lies and government officials and murkiness just is never ending. And so we've got a lot of tentacles that we have to sift through. The best way to keep this organized, in my humble opinion, is using a mind map. And so I'm going to show you that now. It's going to look very complicated, but we're going to clean this puppy up in no time, and you're going to see what I mean. So this is the latest iteration of the mind map, and you can see that Ghislaine Maxwell is right here in the middle, and we've got a lot of different branches that are now stemming out. We've got an entirely new branch that is has been added since the last video, which is the entire Jeffrey Epstein wing of the entire analysis, which is obviously critical because it is directly connected to Ghislaine Maxwell. He was actually being charged for this before they got Gill-len. And so you can see that there's a lot of moving parts here. Let's clean this up and figure out what we're talking about today. So we're going to clean some of this stuff up, and we're going to get rid of the indictment so we know what these charges are. Counts 1 through 8, we've got the first 6 are on trial during this trial. The counts 7 and 8, the perjury counts, those are going over into a different trial. So we're only talking about the minor victim cases here. So we can clean this up, get rid of that important document. We also know that we've got some outstanding issues here. So I visited a lot of these in the prior video. So we'll clean this up. Don't really need to talk about that today. We are going to be hearing from the defense attorneys. We'll come back to them. We had officials, of course, President Biden. We have the judge. She was presiding today, but not going to hear much from her today other than presiding over the case, so we're going to clean that up. Prosecutors, we're hearing from 2 of them today in this segment, in this entire show, actually. We've got Maureen Comey. She did the direct examination of the government's first witness. This is going to be the Epstein pilot, so we're going to hear from Maureen Comey. Of course, this is James Comey's daughter. 32 years old, I think, so quite young to be prosecuting a case like this. And then we have Lara. This is not accurate. Her first name is actually Lara, so L-A-R-A. Lara Pomerantz. She did the opening arguments. So she did the opening statement from the prosecution, prosecuting Ghislaine Maxwell. And so we'll take a look at that. We also have, for the defense now, we've got Bobbi Sternheim. And so she delivered the opening arguments for the defense. And so we'll take a look at, we'll read what it is reported she said. Haven't heard from anybody else. The judge told us this morning that, or asked Jeff Pagliuca, how do you say your name there, Jeff? And he said the G is silent like lasagna. So it's Pagliuca, not Pagliuca. So it's like lasagna. So got some clarity on that. That's good. So we'll close up these defense lawyers, get them out of the way. We also have these defense experts. We're going to be fighting a lot over these people, but not so much in substance today, so we'll close them up. We have a government witness that came out this afternoon. This is the first witness that was called by Miss Comey, Lawrence Paul Visak Jr., and of course, this is somebody who we're going to get to here in a bit. So close up the government witnesses, government experts, not relevant. We've got the prosecutors, already talked about them. Now, I want to clarify a little bit more about the Epstein wing of this, because there was this was left out of the prior video. So while we're here, we'll just get an update on this. And so you can see that now we're starting to flesh out some of these co-conspirators. So recall that back in 2007, Jeffrey Epstein entered into a non-prosecution agreement, a plea deal, for all of his crimes back then. And as part of that plea deal, he created this Victims Compensation Fund, which is a major issue in this case, which we are going to get to. Jordana Feldman and the Victims Compensation Fund, the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, they are now ordered by the court to deliver documents over to the defense attorneys. And so if you come back over here and take a look at these issues, you're going to see that we have a relationship here. This Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, this defense subpoena, it was granted. This is what they're talking about. They're talking about the compensation fund that came out of this non-prosecution agreement back in 2007. So now that we can see that, we also see that a part of that non-prosecution agreement, this is all public. You can take a look actually at the documents. And so take a look at this image. This is from the non-prosecution agreement. You can tease out these people: Sarah Kellen, Adriana Ross, Leslie Groff, Nadia Marcinkova. And so these are the potential co-conspirators. You can see this right here. It will not institute any criminal charges against any potential co-conspirators of Epstein, including but not limited to those 4 women. And so what you're looking at, it says including but not limited to Maxwell, and her defense lawyers were saying, hey, that includes me. Including but not limited to means that includes me. And so they were saying that she should have been a co-conspirator. And so they filed a motion to dismiss previously on that. You can see that we mark that as a denied motion here on the issues, but it's still something that, I think they've got good argument for. I mean, this is still something that really sort of like a Bill Cosby, 2.0. Bill Cosby had a similar deal, and he's free now because of something basically exactly like this. So I think that is, that might come back to bite the government in the butt if Gill-lane is, prosecuted or convicted, I should say. So we also know now that those other 4 women are in here. Some people are speculating, if there's 4 women over there and we know that there's 4 minor victims over here, maybe it's the same people, or maybe it's some of the same people, some of the same women. And, some of the, I haven't done a deep dive on that. I'm sort of not I'm not trying to identify any of the minor victims. If they identify themselves, then that's fine. They've availed themselves of that. And, we can talk about it, but we're not going to be trying, to surreptitiously identify people that don't want to be identified. We're going to do what the court wants us to do here. But we're going to keep an eye on that. So if they start, identifying themselves or the prosecution screws up and they identify themselves, that's a different story. So we also talked about Virginia Giuffre. This woman was, she's very involved. She's actually kind of critical to this case because the 2016, 17 perjury charges that came out of the superseding indictment, these perjury charges, those all relate back to this 2016 defamation lawsuit. When Ghislaine Maxwell was lying, the government said, when she was giving that deposition, Virginia Giuffre was suing them over defamation. And when Gill-lane sat down and had a conversation with them about this, that's when they're saying that Gill-lane was lying at that time. So we can see these are all the parts now, and a lot of this is going to make a lot more sense, as we continue to flesh this out. So I know it is a lot, but it is sort of a good way for us to make heads or tails of this. Government witnesses, this branch is just going to go, multiple branches, multiple layers. We'll probably organize these people into different categories by different victims and witnesses and everything. So we're going to continue to build this out as the trial unfolds, and we'll see what it looks like at the conclusion, because there are a lot of moving parts. There's really sort of even a time dimension. A lot of this stuff goes really back far from the 1990s and things. So we'll continue to follow along with that. Now that we have that backdrop in mind, let's take a look at what's going on outside and around the courthouse. So we are now keeping our eyes on the outside of the Thurgood Marshall Federal Court building. Julie K. Brown is out there on the scene. She's a journalist over with the Miami Herald investigative reporter, Philly born. She's over on Twitter, so give her a follow. Nice big blue check mark over there. She says very, very slow process getting through security at the courthouse. Even some victims forced to wait in line in the freezing cold. And so you can see it kind of looks like, bright and early at the crack of dawn. The morning dusk or whatever that's called is there. So they're outside Thurgood Marshall, and this is the courthouse. You can see big courthouse, beautiful old building located at 40 Center Square, Lower Manhattan, New York City. Building designed by Cass Gilbert and his son is listed in the National Register of Historic Places as a U.S. courthouse. It is, Southern District of New York, U.S. Second Circuit Court of Appeals. They're all there. There's a mega metro sort of correctional center, justice department, all in this area of New York City, which I just learned about here today. And so I want to show you a little bit more about that. This is the outside of the building. As I said, love that style. I think this is what courthouses should look like. I don't think that you see these, really, new, modern, glossy. We have this federal court building in Arizona that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. It looks like a big, ugly greenhouse. And it feels like a greenhouse because some, architect student somewhere thought that they were going to reinvent justice or something dumb. This is what a courthouse is supposed to look like. So nicely done there. Now, this is also the Metro Detention Center, which is right around the corner. And I didn't know this, but in New York City, there's just a massive justice center. So you can take a look here. The Thurgood Marshall United States Courthouse is right here. We have the U.S. Justice Department. They're here. That D.C. Metro Correctional Center is right here. Now, the reason I was looking this up, the reason why I think this is important is because remember that in this trial, we've got about 6 weeks. They were saying 4 to 6 weeks, but the judge said, hold on. We might be going well into January, might 6, maybe 8 weeks, maybe. So hopefully 4, maybe 6, depending on how this goes, depending on who the defense wants to call in this case. They've got enough people to call, probably till March for all I know. So, this could go longer, could go shorter. We really don't know. 4 weeks on the very short end, 8 weeks on the very long end, probably 6 weeks. And so one of the big questions is, this is a very grueling thing. Okay, many people don't understand this. When you're a lawyer or you're somebody who is needing to this is game day for lawyers. Okay, this is game day going into court. This is game day for defense attorneys, for prosecutors, for most judges, for all the witnesses, for the jurors, for Gill-len in particular. She's being hauled back and forth from jail every day. The jurors got to schlep their way in there, haul themselves into court, every day. Go through this big mega complex. Go through security. I haven't spent a lot of time in New York City, but I'm going to guess that it's not easy to get here, wherever this is, from where these people are coming from. It's New York City. It's not like they're just going to run down the street to pick up a gallon of milk. So they've got to go through this every single day in order to be a part of this process. It's a lot. It's grueling. It's like, it's like waking up every day if you're a football player and going out there and playing a game. Or I wrestled, it's like going and having a wrestling match every single day. It's a lot. And we talk about it in terms of marathons. Even a 3-day trial, at the end of a 3-day trial, you're just wiped out. You're totally exhausted. So everybody's got to, optimize for the marathon, for the 100-mile sprint that's going to be taking place here. And for Gill-len, actually, this is very convenient. She's right next door. Basically, probably just going to walk across the hall. They're just going underground, whatever, hallway, and just, here you go, wake up and just walk right across the street, which is very nice, for her. In some other situations, it's not that easy. You're transporting people back, 20 minutes, and it can be sort of, a big process. So that's a little bit of the situation. Defense attorneys are going to be posted up. Defense attorneys, they may have rented a hotel, probably did, several hotels, big conference rooms, sort of have a command center posted up somewhere in the area, who knows where. The U.S. Justice Department, their entire office is here, so they kind of have home court advantage. They've got the entire stinking, building is there. The entire Southern District of New York is right around the corner. These defense attorneys are at a distinct disadvantage. They don't have billion-dollar budgets and entire, buildings set up for support. So they, set up wherever they're setting up, getting good sleep and preparing for the trial. Okay, so enough of that, but it is important. So we also have interesting people showing up at the courthouse for the trial. We can take a look here. This is victim Sarah Ransome. It says, quote, I never thought this day would come. And so she's all suited up with her handbag and a nice red outfit outside the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse, and she's ready to go there. And so, we don't know, again, is she an official victim? Maybe somebody knows. I don't know if she is an official named victim or what number she is, or if she's just another person who is another victim of Epstein. We learned that there was something like 150 claimants that got paid out by the Epstein Compensations Fund, and those were around 125 million divided by 150 payouts. So a lot of money, almost $1 million going to everybody who was out there and involved in it. We have some other people on Twitter. This guy is actually there on the ground, and so he was interviewing people. He's a good follow. One Addy Ads. Interesting guy. He's out there, literally outside the courthouse. He's interviewing people and, getting into conversations. And so he took some photographs of this woman. Says, reporter something kill. It's not a Make America Great hat. Let's see what it is. Once again, that's that photograph from the morning. People getting their coffee, Starbucks, and slurping it down. We have, this was the woman, Epstein. Oh, it's Epstein didn't kill himself is what's on her hat. So it's not Make America Great Again. It's Epstein didn't kill himself, which is obvious. Ghislaine Maxwell, your time has come, she's got on her sign. And so she is just listing off everybody involved in this puppy. Let's see here. We've got Jeffrey Epstein, Prince Andrew, Virginia Roberts, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Huma Abedin. We've got John Roberts, Comey's in the house. Barack Obama, Michelle. Oh, it's not Michelle, it's Michael Obama. Notice that one. We've got Joe Biden, Lil St. James, Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey. We got the Podesta brothers. We've got Ellen DeGeneres, Disney, Mark Zuckerberg, everybody. And there he is, Dr. Fauci, along with Lady Gaga, clearly. So that's one sign. We have another one, says 800,000 kids go missing annually in America, over 9 million globally. This is not by mistake. Child trafficking and exploitation is a multi-trillion-dollar business, bigger than every drug and major crimes combined. They're after our children. Wake up, she says. Another sign says the real virus is called pedophilia. The media isn't silent on trafficking on Gill-len because of the children or victims. They are silent because of who the customers are. Oh, I like it. The media is not silent because of the victims. They're silent because of the customers. And who might those customers be? Well, we have a nice depiction of some of them. We have here, Gill-len is flying the Lolita Express with Jeffrey Epstein on board. Right behind him, we've got Bill Gates, we've got Donald Trump, and Bill Clinton, all aboard the Lolita Express, flying their way over down to the Epstein Island. Somebody else says, do you trust Gates with your body? No. Sure don't. Thanks for asking. We also have Maxwell's lawyers. They are working their way into court. So we've got Laura A. Menninger, and we have Jeffrey Paliuka. The G is silent. Lawyers for Ghislaine Maxwell, they arrived in the Manhattan courthouse where trial is set to begin. So everybody's masked up. You can see that they're suited up. These two work together at the same law firm. I think that they were based out of Denver, if I was correct about that. We see another attendee. This is Isabel Maxwell. This is Gill-len's sister. So she shows up at the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse. This is Gill-lane's full family. We've got Philip, Ian. Ian, we've talked about here previously on the channel. He says, this whole thing's a sham, and prosecution is just trying to break her. So, they're twins, Isabel, Christine, Philip, 71, Ian, 64, Gill-lane's 59. And so these are her 6 living siblings. Now, it has been notable that somebody's been missing from the courthouse. It's her husband. Oh, well, this guy, Scott Borgerson, not shown up yet. Daily Mail got a photo of him, I guess, picking up a prescription or something. So we'll see if he's there. The media there, of course, is there in full gear. They're suited up. Journalists set up their live shots outside the Manhattan Federal Courthouse, where Ghislaine Maxwell's trial is set to start today. And so, I have seen some of it in the media. I mean, look, the media is getting a bad rap if you say that they're not publicizing this trial. I'm sorry, broadcasting the trial. If they're not that's not a fair criticism because the court is not allowing them to nobody's broadcasting the trial because the judge won't let them. So if you're mad at anybody, be mad at the federal rules. I think it's even outside of the judge's purview on this. I would love for it to be broadcast and live streamed so that we could see every nook and cranny of what's going on here, but it's just not, and that's just because of the federal rules. So, to the degree that they're covering it, they're probably, doing what we're doing, trying to send a reporter in there, and the court has not even made that easy. And so, people like Adam Klasfeld are really, I think, the only source of information we can get. Other individuals are out there on the streets. This is what the scene looks like from on the side of the road.
Here's the scene outside the courthouse today. A lot of press lined up, a lot of people lined up. Everybody has to go through the security line to get into the federal courthouse.
So a lot of cameras, right? I mean, I don't know who those people are with, and I don't know if this thing's going to get, any attention outside of public interest. Is CNN going to cover this? I don't know. Is the Washington Post going to cover this? We'll see. I mean, I saw it on their websites today, but we'll see how long they stick to it. So that's good news. We've got Sarah Ransome, one of the several women. So I think, is that the same woman? Sarah Ransome, is that the same woman? Let's rewind. Yes, that is the same woman. Okay, same woman. Looks a little bit different. All right, so here she is. Sexual abuse. She was seen arriving to the courthouse there. So same bag, same hat. We've got that. Now, inside the courthouse, this is what it looks like. And this came over from Reuters. Sex trafficking trial begun today in New York, where the 59-year-old socialite faces 80 years in prison if convicted. She's pictured embracing her defense lawyers. Now, I know that I keep making a big deal about this. I know I keep talking about body language. It's important. It's important. And notice that every time we get a picture from Gill-len, I'm not just making it up. The artists keep drawing this. It's like physical contact. They're like all over each other in court. So two things. Number one, they are really like all over each other in court. I've got several sketches now within the last 2 weeks. It started within jury selection where they're like hugging each other, sitting down there at the defense counsel table. And I made a compare and contrast about this about a month ago or whenever that was on Twitter. And I said, hey, Rittenhouse's lawyers didn't do so much of that. And Chauvin's lawyers didn't do so much of that. And I said that this stuff is important. And I've made the point that big portions of certain studies out there say that, huge chunks of all communication is body language. It's not even really what comes out of your mouth. So just another note. There it is again. They are like loving it up in court. And the sketch artists are drawing it all up. So hug your clients, hug your customers. It's very important. All right, so we have another image from inside the courtroom, a little bit of a sketch. And remember what the judge said, that we're going to be using pseudonyms and we're not going to be drawing any real facial features. And so this is a sketch from the AP that says, Ghislaine Maxwell was Jeffrey Epstein's partner in crime who targeted young girls for abuse, the prosecution claimed in a blistering opening statement. We're going to pick up on that here in a minute, but you can see the sketch shows very, very, very little facial features of anybody, right? No noses. I mean, even the hair colors are mostly like browns, grays, maybe a sort of a light, blonde, grayish. And, not a lot of specificity here. The judge said, these are the jurors, but the judge said, no likeness, even on the sketches, because people just got so concerned about this. We don't even want to look at, point here is skin color accurate? Is hair color accurate? I don't know. Can we glean anything from this? Don't know. Does it matter? Do those things in a jury matter in this case? Because it's not a, racial case. So do things like ethnicity matter? Maybe. It's a gender case, certainly, right? I mean, it's sort of a sexual abuse, an abuse of women case, an abuse of children case. An abuse of children case, you might say, is outside of any confines. Nobody likes that. Doesn't matter what demographic you're in. So maybe that crosses all the demographic barriers. But maybe if it's just an abuse of women case, maybe are women more inclined to convict than men? Don't know. So these are the questions that we're looking for, and we don't know what to glean from the jurors other than what they report. So it's all going to be drafted accordingly. We see this as another image. Maxwell pled not guilty to trafficking and other charges, been awaiting trial for over a year in, quote, a hellhole, Brooklyn prison. So we can see this very ominous sketch. Now, this I think may have been earlier in the proceedings, because I don't really recognize any of these people. These may be security, individuals. We have a little bit more, tone and hair color on these, I guess, jurors, but Maxwell is barreling through like Cruella de Vil, sort of hold the doors while she just comes rampaging through the courtroom. That big, blustering entrance. It's Gill-len. Everybody freak out. Okay, so another courtroom sketch. Here she is sitting at the defense table during the final stages of jury selection on Monday. So we're going to talk more about that. Little bit of a last-minute hiccup in jury selection today, but let's go ahead and pause here and see if there's any questions or any comments or thoughts coming in from our friends over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, just so that we can break this up a little bit. Let's see what we've got here. I forgot that is on full screen. And so we have one question here from Llama Brad. Says, how likely is any of this going to come into the Gill-lane trial is relevant? If she had any dirt on anybody important, surely they would have struck a deal to keep that buried. So I think the big question here is about these unindicted co-conspirators, or is there any material here that's going to come out that's going to implicate anybody else beyond Ghislaine Maxwell? And everybody's holding their cards very close to their chest at this moment, so I'm not sure. We've got, but good to see you, Llama Brad. News Now says, seriously, a James Bond comparison for Epstein? What is the first thing any man on that jury is going to think of for the 5 minutes after that comparison? Bond girls. You really want them thinking of a man who would have been sued 1,000,000 times over? I wouldn't be surprised if the jury deliberations, the men spent more time debating the best Bond girl than a guilty verdict. Electra King, played by Sophie Marceau. That's from News Now, Wyoming. You notice that. If we go back over to the mind map, you notice that the women that Epstein was sort of hanging around with, they're not bad-looking women. Right? Nadia, Marcinkova, Leslie Groff, Adriana Ross, Sarah Kellen, Virginia Guffrey. He sort of has a style. Even the administrator of the estate, Jordana Feldman, some lawyer in New York somewhere, she's a pretty good looking gal, So Jeffrey Epstein, yeah, and that's the same thing that you're talking about, News Now, with the Bond analogy, right? Bond, he's kind of a same type of a thing now. Now, ideally, Bond is not, criminally molesting underage minors, which I don't think he has. Probably close, though. John Galgreen, the S is silent, says, Rob, I've been watching an inordinate amount of legal law YouTube over the past few weeks. What I've learned is that many people just love to hear their own voices. I keep coming back to your locals page and this show because you're genuine. Keep up the solid work. And thank you. Well, thank you, John. We're going to keep it up, John. There are a lot of people that love to hear their own voices, which is true. I hear mine. It's right in here. I can hear it. It's not bad. We have another one from Jeremy says, Rob, not sure if you mentioned it or if you missed it, but what program are you using for that fancy social network analysis? Looks very useful. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving weekend. Mine was nice and relaxing. Jeremy, it's called MindMeister. It's a mind mapping software. It's pretty cool. And I think I pay for it, but I think it's free if you want to use it. It's called MindMeister, M-E-I-S-T-E-R. So check that out. Maybe there's a referral link or something like that you can get something free for it. I'll look into it. Thunder7 says, really glad you're talking about this since it's not televised. Couple questions, Rob. I hear that her siblings in the UK were filing to the UN to have Gill-len released on bail. What kind of law would allow the UN to interfere in this trial? Nothing that I would know of. I've never had international diplomatic immunity, something like that. And the workers on Epstein Island signed NDAs Are they void now that Epstein is dead? Will they be called? I remember the butler gave really damaging evidence a few years ago, and then he died mysteriously. Yeah. So they're talking about that. They're battling over a lot of that right now. They're talking about the Epstein, the government Exhibit 52, about whether any of that can come in, whether there's appropriate foundation for that, and it's based on a lot of this. And we talked about that in a prior video, Thunder 7, specifically. The defense is saying that black book, that Exhibit 52, it cannot be authenticated. There's no proper foundation for it. And they have different document experts. They have these two people here. Let's take a look at the mind map again. They've got these two people, these expert witnesses. Down here, we've got Gerald Laporte, document analysis. Look at this guy. This guy is a chemist, and he's going to take a look at that document, and he's going to say, dates of creation, completeness, alteration, manipulation. Global Forensic Justice Center. Prior to that, he was the director of the U.S. Department of Justice, National Institute of Justice. He's a document dating specialist. Forensic, yeah. So I thought he was a chemist. Let's see. I think he's a chemist. So this is over from Riley Welch, which was his website. There it is. Yeah, American Academy of Forensic Sciences, U.S. Secret Service. He trained so he's like a Secret Service guy. He's like a forensic document scientist. So they're going to take that black book and they're going to say, it's not even real. This whole thing's fake. I'm Gerald Laporte. I'm a computer expert. I'm a document expert. And if he can't help with it, then they've got Jennifer Nasso, another document analysis person, and she's got, same background. Same degree here, document examiner, forensic laboratories, signature, handwriting, board of document examiner, the whole deal. So, yeah, it's a good question there. Thunder 7. The idea being that is not a legitimate document, so they cannot use it. That's what the defense is going to say. The government is saying, yes, we can use it because this person, I think it's witness 3 or somebody, they've got enough material that they can lay the foundation for that. We can get it submitted, get it admitted as evidence because somebody else can authenticate it. So we'll see how it goes. I think that's still an open issue at this moment. Super Iron Bob says, I recall hearing somewhere that the Supreme Court has stated that there wouldn't be any violation to have cameras in the federal courtrooms, but so far no court has adopted that ability to open the courtroom up to the public. Yeah, I'm not sure about it there, Super Iron Bob. I think that I read a history on the federal courts, and I think for a long time it's just been something that is just not been allowed. I would love to see that change, though. We have The Last Villain says, wearing a red sweater without a jacket. I don't know if she was a victim, but she really wanted to be seen. You noted the bag. Why wear that particular purse today? People are weird. The Last Villain. It's true. Wasn't it like a really nice bag? Wasn't it like a $5,000 bag? I don't know. I don't know what bags cost these days, but it was like a brand name, bag, whatever that was. That was from The Last Villain. I don't know why she picked that bag or that outfit, but yeah, she stood out. I was wondering if it was a Handmaid's Tale thing, and because don't they wear the red stuff? Yeah, it's probably that. That's probably what it is. Let's take a look at this. Yeah, so see that? I thought it might have been something like that, right? The big red outfit. I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't know. Could have been something like that. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Vientica says, it's interesting comparing the public sentiment of this trial to the public sentiment of previous trials. In this one, there seems to be an overwhelming majority that believe she's guilty. Again, you're seeing a lot of hate being thrown out. But just like in previous trials, I think it's important to point out the need for a fair trial. Being that the sentiment is so ubiquitous, I think it's also important to point out that a true mark of a person's character is not how each person treats the people they like, but how they treat the people they hate. That's from Vienticus. Yeah, I agree with you on that, Vienticus. And listen, I am no fan of Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein. I do not support anything that they did, and I think that they're reprehensible. But I'm a bigger fan of due process and the presumption of innocence and the right to a fair trial. Much bigger fan of that. And so I do not want to see Gill-len or Epstein or Chauvin or anybody not get a fair trial. And if the government's going to try to cross that line, cross those constitutional boundaries, I'm going to have a problem with that, because if you allow them to do that in Ghislaine's case, guess what happens? Next time it's one of our clients' cases right out, right out that door right there. And I can't allow that to happen. So even if somebody is, the most reprehensible criminal defendant you can think of, which for many people, that's Ghislaine Maxwell right here. She still deserves a fair shake, folks, because, you don't want to give the government an inch because it never stops there. And just look around. It was 15 days to slow the spread, as far as I can recall. So it just never stops. So you can't ever give them an inch. And Gill-len deserves a fair trial, just like everybody does, just like Chauvin did, just like Rittenhouse did. They all deserve it. Vientikis says that MindMeister software looks like something like a skill tree in an RPG. It does. Yeah, it's called a mind map there, Vientikis. It's pretty useful for organizing, big chunks of complicated stuff with a lot of relationships. Not good for all sorts of projects, but you can see here, you can really create some pretty good relationships. And this puppy's gonna explode. I have no doubt about it. As long as I don't lose my mind first. That was from Vientikis. We have another one here from Monster One says, sorry, off topic, but Ricada interviewed photo Chad Nathan de Bruin today. That was the guy from the Rittenhouse trial who testified and was awesome. I mean, I love that guy. I was so angry at that prosecutor Krause, that loser, for treating him like he was an idiot. Dude basically lost his job because he testified. Everyone needs to show him support. He's trying to get a fundraiser set up. Until then, people can buy his photos if anyone is interested in supporting him. That was Nathan de Bruin, no doubt about that. Yeah, really, really, I think, heartwarming fella. And he was on Ricada's show today. I did not see that. I saw that come through on Twitter, but I did not actually see the interview. I'm going to take a look at that. So, yes, reach out, check out Ricada's channel, watch that interview, support Nathan de Bruin if you can, because, he went through something, man, and he got treated very poorly for just trying to be a good citizen. He go, yeah, I'm a witness here. I'm just going to show up and be a witness. And they treated him like crap. Llama Brad says, it's amazing how, given the unspeakable nature of her charges, some folks who gave Kyle the benefit of the doubt on the defense are now quick to declare her guilty. Presumption of innocence seems simple, but in practice, it's a nightmare to apply consistently. A lot of people just want to throw that out, man. Tell me about it. Yeah, it is. It is a problem. A lot of people just want to throw that out. Can't let that happen. That was from Llama Brad. Good to see you. The Last Villain says, hilarious, Handmaid's Tale. The bag is no more than $2,000. If she got over 500,000, she isn't going to be going to go too hard. Major says, driving through Phoenix, now bad traffic. I think Epstein was railroaded because of blowing the whistle on the COVID scam. That's from Major. Maybe. I don't know, Major. Drive safely out there. It is rush hour right about now. Quinn Rafferty says, Gill-lane sounds like a road name on Epstein's Island. Could be. That's and Dr. EMB's here. Dr. EMB, it's good to see you. Thank you for that very generous donation there, Doctor. No question from you, but it's good to see you. It's been a long time. Hope you're well. Being the good doctor that we know you are out there, I appreciate you stopping by. Okay, let's go back into the next segment on the show. What are we talking about? That's right. Ghislaine Maxwell, we have a docket update. We have a couple new updates here. Orders 515, 513, and 514. You're going to see these came in on November 28th and the 29th. So, of course, the 28th was a Sunday. That was yesterday. And then 11/29 is today. That's Monday. And so we've got last-minute orders that just came skidding in here right before opening arguments and before the trial started in full in court. And so we can take a look at what's happening here. So let's start off with 11/28. Okay, so remember that we were talking about this Epstein Victims Compensation Program, this item right here. There was a previous subpoena that the defense wanted. Let's see if we can just flip this back. We're going to pull this back up. I want to show you this relationship quickly on the mind map. And so this Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, this was created as part of that 2007 non-prosecution agreement. So this signed 150 different women up, gave them something like $800,000, $900,000, 150 different women or claimants. And of course, this all happened, a long time ago. They just wrapped up those payouts. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell is being charged as essentially a co-conspirator in a lot of those same issues. And so the defense attorneys, they say, we want copies. Ghislaine's attorneys, Bobbi, Sternheim, and all these people over here, they say, we want access to all of these documents from the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund. And guess what? The judge actually granted it. So now when we go back, we can see that this is what we're talking about. The court is in receipt of its third production of those documents. So the compensation fund is just gathering up all these documents. We talked about this in a previous video. All of these documents, and they're just bringing them over in like wheelbarrow fulls. So they got the first one last week, and then this morning on 11/29, we have another order. It says the court is in receipt of the second production of the Epstein Victim Compensation Program. 150, women, 900,000, 800,000 apiece, 125 million bucks. That's a lot of documents. So the administration provides the material via a FTP. Court determines that parties may review its materials. And so what they're doing right now is they're just looking through it. So everybody's going to just look through it, essentially. It's huge swaths of material. And so the court now is saying, look, you can go take a look at it. Everybody can review it. It's reviewing this, it makes no determination as to the admissibility of the material. So as you're looking at it, just because I'm allowing you to look at it doesn't mean we're actually going to get it in front of the jury. Don't jump to conclusions here. Don't be too presumptuous there. The administrator is ordered to produce the materials contained in the second production no later than 11/27. So we saw that. That was from a prior order. And so these two documents are really just about that. Pretty basic stuff. We're going to take a look at those orders. And then we have one other last-minute order. This came in from the government. And so, yes, let's take a look. So this is interesting. Let's take a look at what's happening here. Remember now that almost all of this stuff is being filed under seal. So let me lay some backbone on what's happening here. So in this case, the government has expert witnesses. They're going to talk about grooming. They're going to bring in Dr. Rocchio, and he's going to talk about grooming young women. All right. The government is going to present that during a direct examination. So they're going to bring up their own witness and say, doctor, you investigated this case. Tell me what you know. The defense, after they're done, we just saw this in Rittenhouse, saw this in Chauvin, they're going to have the opportunity to cross-examine the same witness. And they get to challenge him. Yeah, but isn't it true that you said this previously? Yep. Okay. You kind of look dumb, don't you? Because you have conflicting statements now. Cross-examination, impeachment, show bias, to really just rattle that witness and disprove the point that the government tried to make on the direct exam. So now in this situation, we have a last-minute motion by the government saying that after they put up their expert witnesses on the stand, they don't want the defense to ask them certain lines of questions. They're saying, Judge, we're going to put up Dr. Rocchio, our expert or whomever, and we're going to ask them questions. But when it's the defense's turn, we don't want the defense attorneys to be able to ask them about this stuff. Here's what that looks like. It says, here's an order now. So the court came out and they issued an order. The order, it's only allowing the court to file this request under seal. So that request to stop the defense from asking their experts certain questions, we don't really know what it is. We can't really see what it is because the court grants an order that grants the government's request to file this motion under seal. Why? Because we got to protect the privacy interest of everybody who's involved. Blah, blah, blah. So the defense then is ordered to respond by November 28th. That was yesterday. So everybody's on high alert over this thing. But the court, they notice, is in receipt of the government's letter motion to preclude certain lines of cross-examination of the government witnesses. All right, so let's take a look at what these documents actually look like. You can see this is the final order that was electronically filed. And we see here the court is in receipt of the third production of the Epstein Victims Compensation Program. So big chunk of documents. Now, court says you can review this stuff under protective order, and we're not going to, we'll determine admissibility later. Let me know what you see, but otherwise, we'll determine admissibility later on. The court so the court said, we just reviewed it. Now it's available for you. So this stuff is now going to go out to the defense and to the prosecution. You guys have a look. Same type of thing here, except this involved the second production of the Epstein Victims Compensation Program. And then we get to the final order, You can see here another one-page order. The court, says Judge Nathan, is in receipt of the government's letter motion to preclude certain lines of cross-examination of government witnesses. Prosecutor is saying we do not want certain lines of questioning for our witnesses. Not even expert witnesses, just witnesses. So the court is going to allow them to now file this under seal, and then the court will rule on it later. So not a ton of information coming out of the docket, but again, a lot of it under seal, pseudonyms, but we'll continue to piece it together. We do know that before opening statements took place today, opening arguments, that we had some delays with the jurors. There were some jurors that had some issues. 2 issues were raised by 2 jurors. There was a 2-hour delay. Jury was then finally sworn in. There was an 11th hour juror conflict. This came over from the New York Times. You can see another picture here of people and the media outside the lower courthouse, lower Manhattan courthouse. So 2 members of the panel of the jurors, they had different issues. One had a scheduling problem. One had work-related issues. This is actually kind of funny. Around 10 a.m., Judge Allison Nathan read out 18 numbers of the potential jurors. They came down from a pool of 231 candidates. The anonymous jurors, including 6 alternates, were sent out of the courtroom then. So they picked them all this morning. But about 20 minutes later, Judge Nathan told the courtroom that one juror's employer had told the juror it might not pay a salary during the expected 6-week trial. Another juror's spouse had booked a surprise trip over the Christmas holiday, which would interfere with 2 days of trial. Oh, no. You know, typically before you get to this stage, you iron out a lot of those details. But as soon as your number is called, oh, I forgot about that Christmas holiday vacation. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that. Balking by jurors late in the game, not uncommon, but neither is last-minute juror wrangling. Shortly before noon, Judge Nathan told the courtroom she had spoken to the first juror's employer. She urged that employer to reconsider the leave policy. And she was given the employer 10 minutes to figure it out. So, to slow motion this, judge now says, you're on the jury. Says, well, let me tell my boss. Boss says, you're on the jury for what, 6 weeks? You're not coming to work? Well, I'm not paying you for that. Are you nuts? You want me to pay you for 6 weeks? And no, it's holiday time. We got a lot of business coming in. So the juror goes back and tells the judge, Judge, my boss said he's not going to pay me. This is like a really big problem for me. And this guy, this boss, probably thinks it's just like, you know, like a DUI trial or something like that. That's probably just a domestic violence trial or something, whatever. Just go tell him you have to work. Get off the verdict. Get off the jury panel. So Judge Allison calls the juror's boss and says, sir, this is the federal district judge from the Southern District of New York. We're located in the Thursgood Marshall Federal Court building. I'm now asking you to reconsider your company policy regarding extended leave and unpaid and paid vacation. You have 10 minutes to decide. I'll be calling you back in 8. So, not a phone call you want to get as an employer. So that ended up taking longer than 10 minutes. It stretched back into the next hour. Judge Nathan continued ex parte negotiations, which means it's a fancy legal term, which is a very clever Rebecca Davis O'Brien, author of this piece. Very clever there, Rebecca. Ex parte negotiations, saying that she's single party negotiations with the employer. Then at around 12:15, she asked the prosecutors in the defense, did they want to dismiss the juror? You want to name an additional alternate from the remaining prospective jurors that are left in the pool? Who else were waiting elsewhere in the federal courthouse? The decision was made to wait. As for the juror with the surprise vacation, Judge Nathan said she planned to keep that person on the jury. So they're not going anywhere for Christmas. Sorry, folks. You're sticking around for the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. At 12:35 p.m., Judge Nathan said the employer issue had been resolved. Order received, Judge. We'll make sure that employee is paid. Sorry for the trouble. Yes, go back to your trial. All right, so got that cleared up pretty quickly there. And that was the court docket and the jurors finding their seats in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Okay, and now we've got Opening arguments in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Of course, we can't listen in. No audio can be recorded or rebroadcast. There's no video. Fortunately, we have this fella. His name is Adam Klasfeld. He's over with Law Crime News. He's the managing editor there over at lawandcrime.com. He's over on Twitter at Klasfeld Reports, and he's there. So he says, good afternoon, everybody from New York. Give him a follow. It's very fun to follow him along. He was live tweeting today. And so we're going to break this down. We're going to add a little meat around the skeleton. Of course, he's going to give us individual tweets and play-by-plays, and we'll see if we can beef that up just a little bit with some additional context. So he said here that he is in New York. The judge is bringing in the jury for the start of the opening statements in the sex trafficking trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. So give him a follow over there. Poised to deliver an opening statement for the government is Assistant U.S. Attorney Lara Elizabeth Pomerantz. And we've talked about Lara Elizabeth Pomerantz before because back on October 18th, 2015, she posted, along with her brand new husband, Jonah, a publication here on the New York Times, sort of like a wedding announcement. I think that's what it is. Says that they have a Festivus-inspired romance. So they love Seinfeld, which is a good sign. Says Lara and Jonah, they were married Saturday evening. A rabbi officiated. She was 31 years old at the time. So that was back in 2015. So we add, 6 years to that. So she's about 37 years old now. Big case she's working on. She was a litigation associate back then at a law firm in New York. She started work just back then in 2015 as a U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. So she is now the person who's going to be delivering the opening arguments in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. She is a Fulbright scholar, sex education, places like the Dominican Republic, University of Pennsylvania, daughter of so-and-so. All right, graduated from Duke. And she's delivering opening arguments. So here's a close-up of that nice, happy couple. And we go back to Adam Klasfeld, and we say, here's what happens. All rise, says the court. Jury is entering. Everybody stands up. Jurors enter, take their seats. And then we get an opening line by the prosecution. We have Lara Pomerantz here, Assistant United States Attorney, says, I want to tell you about a young girl named Jane. Now, remember, Jane, in this case, we're using pseudonyms, and so we're not going to actually use their real names unless appropriate. But in this case, this young girl, Jane, is a minor victim, presumably. Now, that's a pretty plain name. I don't know if they decided on these names prior to this. If the defense agreed to a name, they probably did, or the courts agreed to that, but kind of a plain name. You might want to pick a name that, has a little bit more flair to it or not. Some names have a, certain connotation to it. Jane, sort of, Jane Doe. It's kind of, a bland name. Not to be offensive to anybody named Jane out there, but the jurors are creating an image in their mind. They have a blank slate, a tabula rasa that's on their mind, and different attorneys are going to try to paint that puppy up. So Lara Pomerantz is going to come out here and tell us the story of Jane. I want to tell you about a young girl named Jane. Okay, that's the first thing. People go, I know a Jane. I know what she looks like. I know a little Janie. What does she look like? So they're creating a portrait, and she's trying to paint that. Let's see what else she says. Says, I want to tell you a story about a young girl named Jane. Who was that woman targeting young girls? No, non sequitur. Who was that woman targeting young girls for sexual abuse? It was the defendant, Ghislaine Maxwell, says Lara. She helped normalize abusive conduct. Adam notes, prosecutors are expected to talk about grooming at trial, and this is part of that conspiracy. She helped to normalize the abusive sexual conduct. Lara says she put them at ease, all so they could be molested by a middle-aged man. Quote, there were times when she was in the room when it happened. She's telling the jurors. It continues, the prosecutor describes the, quote, so-called massages that she says Maxwell arranged for Epstein. It says, quote, what was happening inside those massage rooms was not a massage. It was sexual abuse. prosecutor acknowledges the case, may make jurors uncomfortable before saying he directed girls to massage him while he masturbated. He sometimes received oral sex, and he sometimes penetrated the girls with his no-no parts. So she's getting colorful with the language right in front of the jurors, and Adam Klasfeld is quoting it for us. Adam says, she says Maxwell helped Epstein find those girls. Sometimes she touched the girls' bodies. Now looping Maxwell into this, right? This is all previously about Epstein. Maxwell doesn't have a penis, but she did touch their bodies. Even when she was not in the room, make no mistake, she knew exactly what Epstein was going to do, the prosecutor says. So she's sort of, guilty by proxy. She's a party to this crime. There's a conspiracy that it's well underway here. She knew what was happening. She was setting them up. She was grooming them. And in some situations, during these massages, she was even touching their bodies. And she says, ladies and gentlemen, Jane was not the only one. Going to have other minor victims here. Tells the jurors that Maxwell and Epstein, quote, devised a, quote, pyramid scheme of abuse, encouraging girls to bring other girls to be rewarded with cash. Lara also says, you'll also hear about Epstein's staff, including the pilot for the private planes and the employees from his residence, the prosecutor says. Says, you'll see the FedEx records confirming that Epstein sent a gift to one of his victims when she was 15 years old. She says they were exploiting kids. They were trafficking kids for sex. 15-year-old gift from FedEx. And my friends, that's it. That's the end of the opening statement. That was a lightning speed opening statement, says Adam Klasfeld. And so you can see some of the themes in here. We have Epstein, a lot of conversation about him, but Maxwell was instrumental in the entire equation. She helped normalize the sexual abuse. She was in the room. She participated. She helped even touch the bodies sometimes. And then we get to Miss Sternheim. Defense statement is next up from Bobbi Sternheim. Now you'll notice a little bit different approach here. Bobbi Sternheim is going to get some objections. Let's learn a little bit more about her though. So she's a highly respected and seasoned trial lawyer advocating for her clients. She's holds a top secret SCI clearance. She's represented individuals extradited even internationally. We've got stuff that she's worked on. International organized crime, international terrorism. She's represented federal defendants on death-eligible offenses, capital murder, interstate transport, international this, and so on. Notable cases include, gender discrimination suit against Saudi Arabia and others. Medical malpractice suit against the United States Bureau of Prisons. So somebody who has been around for a long time. Successful verdict. You can see a lot of this. Number of different associations, master's degree in forensic psychology, LLM in advocacy, which is sort of like a PhD for law. And LLM is probably the best analogy there. So very, very competent person, been doing this for a long time. And she taught at Stetson's Oxford UK program. Oxford, wow. All right, so we're going to learn a little bit more about opening statements. Remember that Lara Pomerantz for the government just went, and she finished off telling the story about Jane and about Epstein and about Maxwell being his right-hand woman in the exploitation of all these underage women, going so far as to send a 15-year-old a gift through FedEx. Bobbi stands right up and responds, says, ever since Eve was accused of tempting Adam for the apple, women have been blamed for the bad behavior of men, and women are often villainized and punished more than men ever are. Sternheim says she's proud to represent Maxwell. The government's story, she says, relies upon the claims of 4 accusers. And she emphasizes the time period of the indictment dating back decades. As we all know, memories fade over time, she says. And in this case, we will learn not only have memories faded, but they've been contaminated by outside information, media reports, and other influences. Bobbi Sternheim attacks civil attorneys. They saw Epstein and Maxwell as easy targets for lawsuits and money. Says, quote, she is a scapegoat for a man. Objection, says the prosecutor. She is a scapegoat for a man. I was going to go right into Epstein. Judge Nathan says, as stated, overruled. Epstein's death, Sternheim says, left a gaping hole for justice for these women. Referring to Maxwell, Sternheim says, she is a brand name, talking about Maxwell. She's a lightning rod. She's a convenient stand-in for a man who, objection from the prosecution. So every time that Bobbi Sternheim tries to go back to Epstein, she's saying, objection. Scapegoat for a man. She's trying to talk about the prosecution's motive or bias or justification for it. They're going after Gill-len because they wanted Epstein, but they couldn't get him. So now they're punishing Gill-len. And every time they try to go that route, objection. Adam Klasfeld says, the parties confer privately with the judge at a sidebar to see whether this is a permissible theme for opening statement. So can Bobbi Sternheim imply that the prosecution has sort of a inconvenient situation where they need a stand-in? Is Maxwell a convenient stand-in for a man who what? They object. They go up to the judge. Judge says, let's stay away from that theme a little bit. Let's not speculate as to what the prosecution is doing. You can't sort of hint and imply that these people are bad actors. They're bringing these, they think that there's enough probable cause here to support these charges right here and right now. Let's not imply that they're disingenuous prosecutors, that they're only going after Gill-len because they couldn't get Epstein. So they go up, talk to the judge. Bobbi says, okay, judge, I understand. They come back after the sidebar. Then Sternheim switches topics. So doesn't continue to go down that route, steers away from it, and then urges jurors not to judge her client on her affluence. Says privileged background, comfortable lifestyle, status. They may be things that easily check the wrong box, but they're not crimes. And then talks about Jane. Jane is from the prosecution. Says, I wish I could tell you a progressive once upon a time narration, but the evidence is not conducive to that. Says, the themes of this case are simple. Memory, manipulation, and money. Do you see that right there, folks? That's what a $20 million defense looks like. Memory, manipulation, and money. That's it. That's $20 million right there. 20 million bucks right there. First of all, it's the triad. It's the three. I don't know how many times I have to say that here on this show. The good lawyers use the threes, A, B, and C, and 1, 2, and 3, and beginning, middle, and end, right? It's everywhere. So we get these triads, and you need good themes, and you need a theme that's going to set up a villain. What is the theme that sets up a villain here? Manipulation. What's the theme that gives you the fake because, the justification for excusing these victims? Memory. They just don't remember. What's the bias? Money. This is the theme that's going to be permeating throughout this entire trial. And the icing on the cake on this whole thing, they're all starting with M. It's 3 M's. Memory, manipulation, and money. 3 M's. It's alliteration. Memory, manipulation, and money. It's perfect. It's brilliant. Right. So well done there. And they have an extensive sidebar then, according to Adam Klasfeld. Sternheim says, each of the witnesses who are testifying here received money from the Jeffrey Epstein Compensation Fund. Each of the witnesses who are testifying here received money from the Jeffrey Epstein Compensation Fund. In her opening statement, every one of them. I mean, how is that not automatically biased? Sternheim is taking turns attempting to undermine each of the women identified in the indictment as minor victim. She's currently speaking about Annie. Annie is somebody, she says, you will learn that she was above the age of consent in New Mexico, she says. And the U.S. attorney's objection. Can't say that. She's above the age of consent in New Mexico? Side note, 3 of the 4 women are testifying anonymously. This comes from Adam. Reporters are observing the journalism ethics, not identifying the victims without their consent. But we do have this woman. Her name is Annie Farmer. She is the one who stepped forward publicly, and she is the one that Bobbi Sternheim is referring to. So we'll update our mind map with that. She says she was 16 when she was abused. The defense argues that 16 back then was the age of consent, but the prosecution is expected to point to other states where she traveled where that age is higher. So might have been legal when she was 16 in New Mexico, but it is illegal when she flies over to Florida or flies over to New York or wherever else one of Epstein's, properties were. And he's got a lot of them, as we're going to hear. So Bobbi Sternheim continues and said, the government is trying to stitch together the stories of 4 different people, 4 stories to show a pattern. She calls the common pattern money. That's the pattern. It comes from the Epstein fund. Big bucks, she says. Lot of money. And to close it out, she says, they are not going to overcome the burden. They will not overcome reasonable doubt. Statement concludes, and there's a 10-minute recess before the start of witness testimony. That's from Adam Klasfeld over at Law and Crime. And that concludes the opening statements in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. We move on. Now that opening statements are closed, the government calls its first witness. We have Epstein's former pilot, the guy who flew Epstein and presumably many others back and forth to Epstein's island on the Lolita Express. So Adam Klasfeld gives us some more details here. He's on the scene, says, we're back. Judge Allison J. Nathan over here, you can see a photograph of her, says, Ms. Comey, this would be your witness. Judge Allison is referring to Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey. Talked about Maureen in the prosecution video that we did, talking about all Epstein's case prosecutors, 4 of them, if I'm not mistaken. James Comey's daughter. So U.S. Attorney Comey is about to call the trial's very first witness. Judge also notes proceedings are going to end promptly at 5 p.m. And they did. Right on the clock. First witness is up. The guy's name is Lawrence Paul Visacki Jr. Or Larry, as he says. Here's what he looks like. Larry is now going to be testifying, and you can see this photograph is of him in an aircraft. He's the pilot, Epstein's former pilot. Spent a lot of time with the family. In fact, so close to Epstein that his daughter got married at that same New Mexico ranch, that same ranch that many people are arguing about, that the government is arguing about. Epstein's personal pilot got married there. Sorry, his daughter got married there. Yeah, we've got another photograph. Happened back in 2017. Epstein was found dead, but Visacki, age 59, worked as Epstein's chief pilot since 1990, running his fleet of private jets and helicopters. So not just like a one-off pilot, some guy who just, took him someplace one time. Since 1990, ran his entire fleet of private jets and helicopter. He flew Epstein's larger 727, the Lolita Express, which carried Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Kevin Spacey, and Naomi Campbell. Just some real, creme de la creme of individuals there. We have stunning photos of the wedding, that happened over at Epstein's ranch. Huge ranch, has stable, gardens, all that stuff. Epstein has an $80 million fleet of private jets. Though the setting of the nuptials was innocuous, Epstein told scientists he wanted to turn this Zorro ranch into a baby-making factory. Yeah, Epstein had some really weird stuff with that. Like eugenics, wanted to, spread his DNA all over. Disgusting. I don't know what that was all about. But here is another individual photograph. This is the pilot. This is him flying the 727, the Lolita Express, carried Bill Clinton and many others. So that is the pilot. And so this is the government's witness. They call him first into court today. Maureen Comey, the prosecutor, says, tell us about yourself. Go into a direct examination, says, I was captain during the initial part. I was a pilot, yes. I was hired in Ohio in 1991, yes. Vysotsky says he was flying Epstein around roughly every 4 days or so. Some of the locales were from Palm Beach to Santa Fe. We went over to New York. We went to St. Thomas. Epstein's Island is in Little St. James, which is close to St. Thomas. Then Vysotsky now identifies Miss Maxwell in court. Okay. All right, so you're flying everybody around. Who was on those flights with you? Well, Jeffrey Epstein was on there, and my co-pilot was on there, and flight attendant people were on there. Anybody else? Ghislaine Maxwell. Is she here in court today? Yes, she's right there. Can you please describe her for us? And do you know that individual to be Ghislaine Maxwell? Yes, I do. Okay. Let the record reflect that the defendant has been identified. All right. So we can continue on now. Says, asked about Maxwell's relationship to Epstein, Vysotsky replied, it was more personal than business. Oh, that's interesting. It was more personal than business. About how long did that romantic relationship last? He says, since about the 2000s. I wouldn't even characterize it as romantic, he hedges. So really just more personal than business. Witness rattles off Epstein's various properties, the house in Palm Beach in Florida, New York City mansion, ranch in Santa Fe. We've got homes in St. Thomas and nearby Little St. James, flying all over the place. So his testimony just gets started. He describes the interior of the New York City mansion in detail. Photos of the properties are now entered into evidence, and they're displayed for the jury. And we saw a lot of those in Epstein's indictment. Jury has then been excused with proceedings ending at 5 p.m. sharp. Direct examination is going to continue Tuesday morning. So tomorrow morning, we'll pick right back up with Lawrence Paul Vysotsky, and we'll see what they have to say about it. Let's see if we can take a quick look for that actual indictment, because I remember seeing that. We have, if we go back over to the mind map, we have this superseding indictment. I think those photographs were actually in this indictment. So probably those same photographs that they're showing to the jurors, I think they were in here. Maybe not. It might have been the original. Yeah, it must have been the original indictment. I think they had photographs in one of the originals. So we'll have to take a look at that. Okay. And so anyways, enough of that. Those are the updates. Those are the updates on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Day one. Let's see what you have to say about this over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. See if we've got any questions here. Now I have to exit out of this. One second. My computer, I think, might be frozen. I don't know what this is doing. All right. Got to reopen the questions, everybody. Sorry, hang tight. That did not, whatever I pressed did not work out well, but it's Monday, so why wouldn't it work? Why would it work? Okay, so that was from The Last Villain. We're fast forwarding on some of these questions. And Majors got that one. Toe says, do you think that all her connections will come to light in this trial, like all the politicians and the celebrities? I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I don't think it's all going to be speculation. Like, there's not going to be a bombshell where we get new data on any of this. Now, keep in mind, though, that there is a hint that the U.S. government was still contemplating potentially additional indictments. Remember when we talked about those co-conspirators and the idea that Epstein's original non-prosecution agreement might have covered Ghislaine Maxwell? Well, there's argument that maybe it's covering other people. that are a part of this that have just not been indicted yet. And so we'll see if that, comes to fruition or goes anywhere. News Now says, I know that if I were to miss out on a week of work, it would hurt financially. Even making the whole $50 a day for sitting on the jury, that would be a massive pay cut. I had seen some of our local judges deny letting you off a month-long trial because of the pay cut. Is that a consideration most judges actually consider? Like it seems to have persuaded this judge, or which is more common? Well, I mean, first of all, 6-week jury trials are not, all that common. Jury trials are not all that common in general. And so, judges more often than not, they just say, look, those are your technicalities. Those are your problems. You have to figure that out. I know it's a lot of work. I know it's hard, but this is a civic duty. This is why it's, so important. You got to make it work, unless it really is sort of extenuating. I've heard judges say to people, is like, there's literally nobody else there that can do that job. Like nobody else. Judge will ask them what do you do exactly? Okay. And you can't find anybody else to do that. Okay. For 3 days, nobody can cover that for you. All right. So they'll beat people up about it. It's not just like, oh, okay, you're irreplaceable. Great. Have the day off. Tremendous says, does trip insurance cover jury duty? If so, that would make a great commercial. Buy my trip insurance. And if you have a judge that doesn't care about your trip, we got you covered. That's from Tremendous. We got Vientikis says, I want to tell you a little story about a little girl named Person 1. That's what I was going for. That's exactly what I was going for, Vientikis. I was like, why don't you name her that? Feel really bad about her. Her name's Person 1. She's very generic skin tone and nothing worthy of notes in terms of facial features or hair color. Absolutely the blankest person you can think of. Thunder 7 says, I'm a little confused. If over 150 victims were given compensation for their abuse, why are only 4 testifying against Maxwell? Surely the more, the better to prove her guilt. Also, many of the victims were minors, so does this increase the charges or the punishment? Yeah, certainly it does. Yes, it does, right? So, prostitution versus, trafficking in minors. Yeah, 2 totally different categories of offenses. In Arizona, one is 15 days in jail. The other is 15 years in prison, or whatever. So you have to think 2 totally different categories. So as soon as it becomes a minor, it's a whole different ballgame. Unless, of course, you're talking about sexual assault or, rape or those types of offenses. But if you're talking about, sort of prostitution, that's a different category. Not saying that that's what happened here, but, there was probably a lot of that going on in this entire ordeal. So if there's 150 victims, these are people, who maybe didn't want to file charges or come forward. They were happy with their financial settlements. It's a lot of people, isn't it? Grouchy old cat lady says, where were the parents of these girls? What's the story behind letting them go to the island? Think any of them will testify? Well, they've got 4 victims that are going to testify. Llama Brad says, don't employers face potential legal civil issues if they retaliate against an employee who is serving on a jury? Probably. I've never actually had that come up. So when you get a call from a judge, you kind of abide. Major says, Bobby's opening statement says women are punished more harshly than men. Wow, really? No way. Does she not see prison records and divorce cases? That was from Major. Yeah, it's a spicy one there. SDNY is corrupt says, is the reason that a federal court doesn't allow audio recordings inside is to hide corruption? SDNY is a corrupt court engaged in political prosecutions on Biden opposition. I would not be surprised if Gill-lane gets railroaded and we have another Thomas Binger in there, especially with no recordings. There are too many Thomas Bingers out there. Hopefully there's not one in SDNY, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, these people are everywhere. Something must be done about it. But I don't think it's to hide corruption specifically. Maybe it is. Maybe you could make that argument. The feds know that if they get implicated on anything, they're going to federal court, and they don't want their dirty laundry aired out for the rest of us. But people like Kyle Rittenhouse, people like Kim Potter, trial starts tomorrow, people like you and me, it's all fair game. But if you're Jussie Smollett, if you're a media darling, if you're somebody that wanted to be in the limelight of publicity, your trial is not public. Your trial gets swept under the rug because judges in Chicago don't want to look bad. That's from SDNY is corrupt. Epstein did not kill himself, says, I'm quite surprised that Gill-len is still alive and hasn't been Epstein. Do you know why it has not happened, considering she has blackmail materials? Well, no, I don't know why. I don't know why. Hopefully she lives a long and, lovely life wherever she ends up in prison. Jeremy Matrita says, Rob, sex trafficking is a real problem all over the world. Not only is it reprehensible, it is slavery at its worst. Unfortunately, Epstein was also into blackmail and would use that leverage to make deals, enrich himself, and stay out of legal trouble. I sure hope that the prosecution is able to get justice for all who were wrong. Yeah, part of the problem here, though, Jeremy, is that the prosecution is kind of in on the whole thing. They're the people who concocted that corrupt garbage deal with Jeffrey Epstein back in 2007 in the first place. So the government are not the heroes in this case. Arguably, they're the people who allowed it to get to this position in the first place, because if they had they prosecuted Jeffrey Epstein appropriately in 2007 and not given him this garbage non-prosecution agreement where he could continue to do the same stuff for the next 20 years or so, they started it all. So they don't get to ride in here and act like, they're heroes who are fighting on behalf of, the sexually oppressed or not oppressed, trafficked. That's nonsense. They're part of the same power structure that protects these people top to bottom, which is why people are so interested in it, because we know that it involved, it's not just Ghislaine Maxwell. Just like Derek Chauvin is not, the melting point of all racial problems in America, but he was made that. He became the scapegoat for all of America's racial animus, Derek Chauvin. Kyle Rittenhouse became the symbol, attempted to become the symbol, or they wanted him to be the symbol of white supremacy and militias in America. Ghislaine Maxwell, they want to be the symbol of, pedophilia and sex trafficking. And so they'll just, wrap this up. Oh, it's just Ghislaine, put a bow on it and we'll just be done with this and never have to talk about it again. Yeah, right. This goes way beyond her. That's why we're so interested in this case here. It implicates people across the globe, including the Prince of England. What? But they want to just keep this narrowly confined to Ghislaine Maxwell, yeah, and Jeffrey Epstein. He's dead. She's going to prison. Nothing to see here. We're all done. Give me a stinking break. All right, let's go. Brandon says, what is the relationship between witness protection, Sixth Amendment, the right to confront your accuser? Also, SDNY is corrupt. and Epstein didn't kill himself. And also, we should probably go on record as saying that I don't believe that Ghislaine Maxwell killed herself at all. I don't believe that. Don't believe it. Witness protection, your Sixth Amendment right to confront your accuser. A lot of issues about that. It's called the Confrontation Clause. It's in the Constitution. It is a pretty important concept. And so you have to balance those things out. Protecting a victim versus your right to confront your accuser. Things like that are very important. Mama Goob is here. Says, okay, maybe I'm really just really jaded. But am I the only one who really doesn't care at this point about Epstein and Ghislaine's personal abuse of these kids and more care about if or what Epstein was doing to facilitate others to abuse these kids? I say this even as a mom of teens. What happened to those kids is an abomination, and Gill-len should be punished for being an accessory. But do not forget, these kids were paid pretty decent money. They received their abuse in a posh Palm mansion on a private island. Most people who get abused get the deed done in a back alley somewhere and are beaten within an inch of their life. And they get no media attention, much less hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can't even... if they just focus on Epstein and Gill-len on their personal abusive behavior, like the documentary did, not the larger ring, then this whole trial is just a show and a waste of time and resources. Well, I mean, I guess there's a point to that. You sort of have different scales of sexual abuse, I guess. I guess. You've got, Mama Goob. What a comment this is. Yeah, they were raped, but it was on an island. It was on the beach. It was really near the beach, so it wasn't as bad. What did Whoopi Goldberg say? It's not real rape. Is that kind of your Weinstein? It wasn't like rape. I think that's what she said. I think that's the argument that Mama Goob is making here. If you're raped on an island on a beach and you flew there in a private jet, That's not that bad as being raped in a back alley somewhere. I guess if you have to take one or the other, you pick one. Oh, my goodness. Thank you, Mama Goop, for that. Very, very great comment. News Now says, if Kevin Spacey was a frequent flyer, I'm no longer convinced this was about sex. We've never seen evidence of little boys being part of these trips. And, Kevin Spacey, yeah, I mean, it's pretty... Three Girlie says, since the pilot has been around a long time, can he be charged as a co-conspirator? After all, he transported all these minors. Yeah, there's good argument for that, Three Girlies. Now, they may not charge him because he's necessary in their case. He's, sort of a key witness. In fact, he was the first witness. So, they may be not trying to get him because they've got the bigger fish and they need him to get to them. But I'm sure there may have been conversations about that. We could charge you too, buddy, for flying this back and forth. Vientika says, just to pontificate a little more, listen to a song by Sir Mix-a-Lot called Bramelo. Sure you've heard about a teenage girl that looks older, lies about their age, gets worse when you're in the military. There's a historic trend of predatory actions by teenage girls on young enlisted military members. So while on one hand you get all this nonsense about normalizing pedophilia, coming up with terms like MAPS and other things, don't know what that is. On the other hand, the whole idea of being young constitutes automatic innocent victimhood. Says that's also equally ridiculous. The truth is somewhere in between. Yes, there are predatory... Don't want to jump on the bandwagon. I'm skipping over some just because of the words. I don't want to continue to say the words on YouTube. It says, so again, I don't jump on the bandwagon of hating people. I don't jump on the bandwagon of young people automatically being innocent. It's just not too good an idea in my experience to so readily group people into categories. I think that's fair. Vientika, yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. It's the presumption of innocence is really what you're talking about. And so the government has to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. And it doesn't matter what the charges are. The Last Villain says, can Bobbi ask accusers about money received? So that she's certainly going to try. Absolutely going to try. They're going through all of that right now. That was part of the conversation that we had about Epstein Victims Compensation Fund and about that, what they could talk about. Toast says, this is such a tinfoil hat case, though. It is, and I think there's good reason for it. Grouchy Old Cat Lady says, if behavior is an important part in defense, do they let prisoners and defendants get hair color, cut, style, makeup before going to court? Many states don't, just a change of clothes. I don't know. That's a good question. So we've gotten haircuts and things like that. But makeup, I don't know. I've never had that. I would presume that makeup would be okay. Many states don't, just a change of clothes. I mean, listen, look, if you're bringing your client into a trial and he looks like a hobo, yeah, we're going to get a haircut and, color and makeup, whatever, like that's something that you're going to fight for. And I don't think that a judge would be justified in denying that. If somebody's been in prison for 12 months while their case is in pretrial proceedings, yeah, they're going to need a little bit of a refresher. Kincaid says, duty or not, paying a fair rate is only reasonable. Not sure what we're talking about there. Chairman of the board says, I see a lot of smoke on social media for the lack of talk of this trial versus the Rittenhouse trial from both the public and the mainstream media. I was trying to figure out why I was not as emotionally invested. It's because I feel like at the end of the day, she deserves to be punished for her part in all of this. That is proven, of course. But we know there were a lot of rich and powerful people that were actually committing the acts that will never be held accountable. This makes it really hard for me to get worked up about this trial. It just makes me sad. One person will take the fall, then it all goes away. If this were what we think it would be, as we see in the movies, the state would be making a huge deal with her to take down a ton of people. But I don't feel like there's any chance of that happening in this case. So yes, I'm less enthusiastic for sure. That's for chairman of the board. I think that's fair, Chairman. I mean, I think Rittenhouse was kind of a once-in-a-lifetime situation, honestly. I mean, can you remember anything that had that much public interest? I can't. I mean, Chauvin did, and, there were a lot of these cases, but Kyle Rittenhouse was sort of like it was like a rally. I mean, it was like a Trump rally. It was like without the Trump, it was like a pep rally. Everybody was fighting for this kid in a way that you haven't seen before. So I think that was an aberration. I mean, if you're thinking that we're going to get 100,000 people on Rekieta's live stream for, Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't think that's the case. I think that was a phenomenon that happened within the confines of Rittenhouse. It was a David versus Goliath story. It was a human, Hollywood story. I mean, it was like a novel. It was crazy, and it worked out the way that it did. But I mean, typically, Chairman, criminal cases are like tragedies. They're like little explosions that go off, and oftentimes there are no winners at all. Rittenhouse had a protagonist in the story. There really isn't one in the Gill-len case. Everybody's kind of garbage. Everybody. Government, prosecutors, Comey's daughter, same person who was prosecuting Epstein, all their hands are dirty. SDNY, it's all just this big, disgusting, incestuous mess. So I can understand you being less enthusiastic. But there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here, and a lot of interesting little nuggets that we can glean out of this big, disgusting mess. So we'll keep covering it. Now, I'm not sure, to be fair, I'm not sure that we're going to be doing Ghislaine Maxwell every day for the live show, because there may not be that much to talk about. I mean, today we had a lot of images. We had, a nice docket update, but we might have, full day of one expert witness just testifying all day. And so I'm not sure if I can make that, an entire live show, and other stuff's going to happen. And so, the Gill-len stuff, we may check back in and out on, sort of depending on what you want, ultimately. I'm interested in a lot of different cases. We've got Kim Potter starting tomorrow. Jussie Smollett is also starting, but none of that's going to be televised. I know that there's some interest on the Chad Reed shooting stuff, so I'm open to this. But, the Ghislaine Maxwell case, I think, is very important, because it is that upper echelon of people. This is a person who is a part of the power structure that typically is not prosecuted, as we have seen with Epstein, right? He sort of escaped any real responsibility for this for decades. And now she's kind of in the thick of it. And you don't really know what's going to happen. This woman has a lot of leverage, I would suspect, in her back pocket. And they've thought that through. And what they're going to do, what I'm suspecting they're doing, long strategy here, talking about a 5-year strategy, they're not using any of those cards. They're going to see what happens at trial. Ghislaine's going to suffer it up. I think she's got some very good arguments on an appeal if she loses, and that trial hasn't even started yet. So think about all of the appealable issues that will happen at the end of trial, in addition to what has already happened with motions to dismiss and things like that. And if this woman walks, it's almost the opposite of Rittenhouse. If this woman escapes criminal liability and she walks free, whoa. As many people were doing cartwheels as we saw when Rittenhouse got exonerated, be like the opposite of this. What if she gets acquitted after all of this? Ugh. That's what's so interesting about it to me. And she's got, it's a multi-million-dollar defense. Kincaid says, it is a reminder that, quote, we are them, and them be above us. That's for sure. They are in a different tier. Three Girlie says, that juror's employer probably said, this person has used jury duty as a reason to get off work before. Maybe their employer thought that they were making it up. LOL. It's from Three Girlies. Yeah, maybe. Again, how many juries are you going to be on? No, not 6 weeks. A third murder trial? No, that's insane. And then he gets a phone call from Judge Allison Nathan. We have Donald Trump says, Ghislaine Maxwell, I wish her well. I wish her well. La Medic says, your take on ASU students demanding Kyle be kicked out of school. Any ASU student who's demanding that Kyle be kicked out of school, my take on them, that they're morons. I'll just leave it at that. That's the school that I went to. But why would you kick any student out for being acquitted at a criminal trial? What? He was acquitted. He's not guilty of anything. He hasn't done anything wrong. Officially. Leafy Bug says, hey, Rob, happy Monday. Got to say, this trial should be one spicy meatball, or even a giant pot filled to the brim with spicy meatballs simmering in extra spicy sauce. Oh, that sounds so good. Yet it is, so far, a blob of boiled tofu. It will probably remain so, but I guess it was always going to be that way with many Fed court rules, meaning limited public scrutiny, and the state is doing its darndest to make sure the focus of the trial is as narrow as possible. We certainly wouldn't want the conduct of redacted, 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 redacted times 1,000 to face that big, beautiful spotlight of transparency and accountability. No, they wouldn't. That's from Leafy Bug. Love that, Leafy Bug. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, well, we're still going to shine that spotlight on him. It's a little harder to get it through the cracks, but that's why we've got a mind map. Good to see you, Leafy. We got DG McBride says, what everyone has forgotten is that Ghislaine Maxwell was, quote, hiding in plain sight in the U.S. when she was arrested. The U.S. was the last place she should have been living. Sounds like a Darwin Award winner. Yeah, she was absconded. It was like in New Hampshire or something up there in the Northeast. Just kind of hanging out, I think, at a multi-million-dollar property somewhere. I don't know if it's a Darwin Award, DG McBride, or she is just so immune to any of this that she's just like, well, I'm just going to hang here at this mansion for a couple of months. Because she just knows that, like, she's basically untouchable. Rich Cook says, Gill-len, FFS. That's what he says. It's Gill-len. Is how I'm saying it. News Now says, I don't think any of this is related, but I do remember when I first got to my first base in Texas, 2 young airmen were prosecuted for their actions with minors. They found the girls at a nightclub that carded you. The girls all had fake IDs, yet these young men's lives were ruined on it. Both ended up getting 2 years in prison. Yeah, it's a pretty disgusting thing there, News Now. That happens a lot. That happens a lot. It really is kind of a gross thing for young men to get caught up in stuff like that. Even the allegation ruins you. It's over because you've got now a sexual assault allegation on your record. And a lot of these crimes are strict liability, which means it doesn't know if you didn't know her age. Doesn't matter. I didn't know. Doesn't work. Jeeves, the butler, is here. Toast says, Jeeves, the butler, is going to have a hard time parking, gathering limo in front of the courthouse every day for 6 weeks. Talking about all the elite there who are going to watch the trial, presumably. We also have this one from Briggs. On the bright side, if the progressives get their way and dispense with the Constitution and the rule of law, performing a Viking blood eagle on pedophiles with a soup spoon is no longer off the table. I don't know what that is. But that sounds just like a lot. Former LEO says, if they could make this a political trial, it would be front page. If they made this, well, they could. They could easily make this sort of a Me Too thing, but they're not. Almost read that one. You son of a, almost read that one. Almost read it. Do you think the defense stands a chance to possibly win after all this media coverage? Keep up the great work. Yeah, nice question. Trying to sneak that one through. The question is from a person named Ty. Last name is Knee-Dick. First name is Ty. Last name is Knee-Dick. Ask that question. Monster1 says, Rittenhouse is equitable to O.J. Simpson based on the coverage. Hocus pocus and out of focus is this generation's. If the glove don't fit, you must acquit. Yeah, that's a comparable case, I think. O.J. was about as... but, I mean, how old was I? I mean, I must have been, 8, 6, something? Former LEO says, make this a racist trial and stand back. Yeah, and tuck it away in an election year, too. Former LEO says, if she walks, there won't be any riots. I think that's probably true. Hunter Biden says, I wonder if they know I was on the island. Don't worry, Dad will take care of it. Chairman of the board says, I agree with everything you said about why the Rittenhouse trial was so intriguing. My point was more that I think Gill-len will take the fall and none of the rich and powerful will be affected. All go away. That's the frustrating part. But I'm still interested and will watch because I'm hopeful it will somehow be pulling off of the first thread that unravels more. Lord, if I'm ever raped, please don't let it be on a beach. That's from Chairman of the board. No, definitely. I mean, a beach introduces, some complexities to the whole equation there. Sand and salt water and seaweed. It's complicated. Vienticus Prime says, we all know the real point of this whole trial is how to pronounce her name, which we're going to get to the bottom of that. We'll see what the jurors have to say about it. Jay, he says, I was shocked she didn't flee the country when she knew law enforcement was after her. If you have that much money, hide in a country without an extradition hearing, treaty, and enjoy your life. Too little, too late. Keep it up, brother. That's from Jay Heath. Thank you, Jay Heath. And let's see here. Couple super chats came in. Oh yeah, Dr. EMB was in the house. Shout out once again to Doctor. And Beth Coddington with our last message of the day says, Rob, I love your reaction to Mama Goob's comment. How do you respond to that? Kind of like the gal that thought the parade massacre was karma for the Rittenhouse verdict. Just drive them to the local psychiatrist and pray for them. You know, look, folks, reading these locals' comments sometimes is a real thrill for me, because you never know where it's going to end up, especially on a comment like that from Mama Goob, because she starts off like a very, thing, and then it starts going into different versions of rape and sort of, millennials complaining about rape, just whiny, complaining millennials, which is like hysterical. And it's just a lot of fun. And I just love it. I love this show and I love this community and I'm laughing my ass off. Hopefully it's not annoying. Briggs says, off topic, on the Rittenhouse ASU butthurt, one of the organizations wanting to kick Kyle out of ASU is the same one, that Multicultural Solidarity Union, that tried to have the two white kids kicked out of their safe space over Police Lives Matter sticker on a laptop. I mean, it's just nuts. It's just nuts. Honestly, I don't, if I had children, I'm not sure I'd be sending them to any university at this stage, but fortunately I do not. And those, my friends, were all the questions that came in from watchingthewatchers.locals.com and from our friends over on YouTube. Big thank you, shout outs go over to Dr. EMB, Beth Coddington, and many others who are in the house. Reminder before we get on out of here that we have a monthly locals meetup taking place Saturday, December 11th, 7 to 8 p.m. over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. This is a lot of fun. We do a Zoom meetup. You can come by, swing by, hang out for an hour or 2 hours, or we went 3 hours last time. Long show or long meetup. And have your cameras on, use your real name, use a pseudonym, doesn't matter. This month, though, on December 11th, it's going to be very special because we have an ugly sweater edition. And it's going to be the ugliest of the ugly sweaters. And so hopefully you can come and join us. Get your ugly sweater. I already have one or two somewhere around here. But I might just get another one for this very special occasion. I hope you do as well. Big welcomes to some new members over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Aldo the Apache, Carrie C. We got Gino Scrajab. We got Rugger Bugger, J Markey, Cantonese. We got Brody Son, Squirrel, Oh No, 50, P Palin, Redbeard, Monique, Nicole, Doctor, Facebook Law, Hobo Jim, Mombino, WV Ridge Rider, Mayhem Studios, Ben Tomlinson, Laurel, 720. Unsheath, Tucker Greb, Tommy Nukes, Phantasmagloria, Black Cat Meow, Nick McLeod, Dr. Brenton, T. Blakemore, Patriot Minute, Chris C123, Dr. Sammy D, Pub Crawl, Julie, Fluffles, Woods 08, Karaoke Princess, Not the Great, Cora Coco, Overton, Transparency. We've got Miss Sin Lin, Desert Pirate, BJR, J-Bot, DC Jen, David Orndorff, Drew Johan, Nice T, Miles Breeden, Time Lord Stu, Tester 22T, OG Rawl, Coronis Adair. And that, my friends, is it for me for the day. That is Ghislaine Maxwell in a nutshell. We've got a lot more of it coming up. So hopefully you stick around and subscribe if not already done so. I'd really appreciate it if you share this. Tell them, hey, come on over here. Nobody else is talking about this in the depth that we are, I presume. At least in the mainstream media. I know a lot of other attorneys are doing deep dives on this. And so invite your friends and your family. Say, hey, send them over here. This is a very important trial. This is sort of the ruling class on trial by the ruling class, and we're going to see what happens with it. And we hope you join us as we continue to follow along. If you're not interested in the Ghislaine Maxwell stuff, we are going to be dipping and dodging, like Thomas Binger said, and covering some other stories. We just don't know where they're going to end up. So I'm doing more pre-recorded videos now that are just being published. In the mornings, we're doing more live streams on locals. We had a community live stream this morning about 10:30, just kind of, saying hello, happy Monday. And so if you want to come and be a part of that, we'd love to have you. Watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And now that, my friends, is it for me for the day. We are going to be back here tomorrow to do it all again. Should be right about the same time, about 4 p.m. Arizona time, which is 6 p.m. Eastern, which is 3 p.m. Pacific, which is 5 p.m. Central time. I think that's Texas time out there. And so everybody have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.